In the quiet that followed the most destructive war the world had ever known, a new invisible enemy was already on the move. It would claim more lives in a single year than the Great War had in four. This is the story of the 1918 influenza pandemic, a plague that infected a third of humanity and then, mysteriously, vanished from public memory. The guns fell silent in November 1918. After 4 years of unprecedented slaughter, a collective sigh of relief swept across the globe. In cities from London to New York, strangers embraced, celebrating what they believed was the end of their suffering. But beneath the surface of this hard-won peace, a biological catastrophe was unfolding. A pathogen of unparalleled ferocity was sweeping through populations, targeting the young and healthy with terrifying precision. Our story begins not in the trenches of Europe, but in the American heartland. In the winter of 1918, a physician in rural Haskell County, Kansas, noted a strange and severe illness among local farmers. Patients were struck by high fevers and debilitating coughs, symptoms far worse than the typical seasonal flu. The outbreak subsided almost as quickly as it began, a fleeting and puzzling event. What that country doctor could not have known was that he had just witnessed the first ember of a global wildfire. By March, the virus had found its perfect vector, war. At Camp Funston, a massive military training facility in Kansas, a cook reported to the infirmary with a fever. Within hours, hundreds of soldiers fell ill. The conditions crowded barracks, shared mess halls were a petri dish for contagion. And with America committed to the conflict in Europe, these infected men soon boarded troop ships bound for France, carrying a stowaway that would change the course of history. To understand the terror of this particular flu, we must understand the virus itself. Influenza is a master of mutation, constantly shifting its form to evade our immune defenses. But the 1918 strain was different. It triggered a catastrophic overreaction in the immune systems of the robust and healthy, a so-called cytokine storm. The very strength of a young adult's body became their greatest weakness, their lungs flooding with fluid, essentially drowning them from within. This is why it ravaged army camps and civilian communities in their prime. As the virus crossed the Atlantic with the American Expeditionary Forces, it exploded across the European theater. It ripped through the cramped, exhausted armies of all nations, a democratic killer that ignored front lines and national allegiances. But here is the twist that gave the pandemic its famous, and inaccurate, name. The major warring powers, the US, Britain, Germany, enforced strict press censorship. News of a debilitating illness among the troops was suppressed to maintain morale. Spain, however, was a neutral country with a free press. When the flu hit Madrid, Spanish newspapers reported on it extensively. The world, reading these uncensored reports, began to call it the Spanish flu. A nation that simply told the truth was unfairly branded with the blame for a century. The initial wave in the spring of 1918 was severe, but it was merely a prelude. The virus traveled along trade and troop routes, reaching India, China, and Australia by mid-year. Infection rates then appeared to drop during the summer. A false sense of security set in, but the virus was not gone. It was silently evolving, preparing for a second, deadlier assault. That second wave arrived in late August 1918, and it was a monster. It emerged nearly simultaneously in three port cities: Boston, USA, Brest, France, and Freetown, Sierra Leone. The symptoms were horrifying. Victims developed heliotrope cyanosis, their skin turning a dark blue from lack of oxygen. They bled from their noses and coughed up blood. Autopsies revealed lungs destroyed, filled with the bloody fluid. One army doctor wrote of watching strong men succumb in a matter of hours, their bodies losing a desperate struggle for air. It was a struggle for air until they suffocated. The response, or lack thereof, in some cities turned tragedy into catastrophe. Philadelphia's health director, Wilmer Cruson, ignored warnings and allowed a massive Liberty Loan parade to proceed on September 28, 1918. Over 200,000 people packed the streets. Within 72 hours, every hospital bed in the city was filled. Within 6 weeks, more than 12,000 Philadelphians were dead. It remains one of history's most stark lessons on the cost of public denial. From there, the pandemic achieved truly global saturation. It ravaged communities from the bustling cities of Europe to the most remote corners of the earth. In India, the death toll was apocalyptic, with estimates ranging from 12 to 20 million lives lost. The sheer volume of corpses choked the sacred Ganges River. In remote Alaskan Inuit villages, entire communities were wiped out, their bodies preserved in the permafrost until spring. The virus exposed and exploited every societal fault line. Indigenous communities in North America, already suffering from poverty and poor access to healthcare, were decimated. In some native Alaskan villages, 80% of the population perished. In Western Samoa, a single ship's arrival led to the death of 22% of the entire population. The pandemic didn't create inequality, it weaponized it. By October 1918, the world was breaking down. Cities mandated mask wearing. Though the gauze masks of the era were largely ineffective, they were a symbol of control in a spiraling situation. Public spaces were shuttered, and emergency hospitals were set up in schools and churches. Healthcare systems collapsed. Doctors and nurses, working themselves to exhaustion, fell ill and died alongside their patients. One nurse described the horror of seeing healthy men die in the morning, only to be replaced by more by the evening. The virus displayed a particular cruelty towards pregnant women, with mortality rates estimated as high as 50%. Orphanages overflowed with children who had lost their entire families. The social fabric of entire communities was torn apart. The death was so random, so senseless, that it left a deep psychological scar on survivors. A third, milder wave washed over the world in early 1919. A final grim reminder before the pandemic finally burned itself out, having infected nearly every susceptible person on the planet. When the final accounting was done, the numbers were staggering. An estimated 500 million people, one-third of the global population, were infected. The death toll is now believed to be between 50 and 100 million, dwarfing the military casualties of the World War that had spawned it. In the United States alone, life expectancy plummeted by over a decade. And then, something remarkable happened. The world chose to forget. Why was such a cataclysm erased from public memory? The trauma of the war overshadowed it. The pandemic offered no narratives of heroism, only helplessness. The medical establishment had failed, and was perhaps reluctant to dwell on its defeat. The Roaring Twenties arrived, and a world weary of death wanted only to look forward. For decades, the 1918 flu was a forgotten footnote, a story survivors often carried in silence. But the virus never truly left us. All subsequent seasonal influenza A strains are descendants of the 1918 virus. In the 1990s, scientists, with permission from local communities, exhumed bodies from Alaskan permafrost to recover viral RNA. They successfully sequenced its genome, discovering it was an H1N1 strain that jumped directly from birds to humans. This research has been invaluable, informing our responses to modern threats like SARS and COVID-19. The parallels between 1918 and our recent past are uncanny. The same debates over public health and personal freedom. The same patterns of misinformation and denial. The same tragic disparities in outcomes for the marginalized. History offered us a playbook, written in the lives of 50 million people. The critical lesson is that pandemics are not a question of if, but when. Forgetting history doesn't prevent recurrence, it guarantees it. The story of the 1918 flu is not just one of virology and statistics, it is a story of profound human loss. It is the story of a woman named Margaret, who in 1918 wrote a letter to her sister as she lay dying, surrounded by the bodies of her husband and child. She survived, but kept the letter hidden her entire life, a private testament to her trauma. It reads, in part, "Tell your children about us. Don't let us disappear. They were here, they lived, they mattered." The 1918 influenza pandemic was the deadliest in human history. It doesn't have to be a forgotten one. If you found this journey into a nearly lost chapter of history compelling, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more untold stories.